everyone, and welcome to Celebrating Cinema, a podcast for the love of cinema. I'm your host, Laura Gommans, and today I am here with filmmaker Kiriko Mechanicus.
Hello.
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 So our most anticipated release this March is without a doubt Bong Joon-ho's science fiction comedy Mickey 17, starring Robert Pattinson ×2. It is the Oscar-winning South Korean director's third English language film. If you want to hear us chat in depth about that one, you can listen to last week's episode where we discuss it in our review roundup. Because today we're doing something else. We're diving into everything that happened before Mickey 17. For everyone who's keen to spend a little bit of time with Bong Joon-ho's work and place it in the context of the Korean New Wave. All discussion will, of course, be spoiler-free. But first of all, what is the Korean New Wave? In order to understand, we have to go back in history a little bit. So there was an insanely significant change in the late 80s in South Korea because it transitioned from a military rule to a more democratic government. And all of a sudden, this allowed South Korean filmmakers to be able to explore all kinds of themes that were previously censored. Anything from political oppression, corruption, social inequality. And all these talented filmmakers came out of the woodwork being like, okay, we can talk about this now. Let's fucking talk about it. And on top of that, it was suddenly easier for international influencers to reach Korean filmmakers, which created an awesome mix of Korean themes, but for example, hugely influenced by Hitchcock. This created a whole new genre of movies that were innovative, edgy, violent, and funny, and they revolved around themes that Korean creators had been chomping at the bit to talk about. We're going to be talking about basically the Charlie XCX and Lord of the genre.
Sorry.
I knew you'd like that.
That's basically what it is, you guys.
There are two sides of the coin the industry loves to flip.
So good. Wow, that's a good one.
So, of course, we're talking about Bong Joon-ho and Park Chan-wook. Kiriko has a special bond with Korean cinema, and here she is taking us on a journey back to the year 2019.
The year was 2019. Bong Joon-ho's Parasite was the first foreign film in Academy Award history that won for Best Picture. The Academy Awards are, to me, and I think also to many, by no means an indicator as to what great cinema is or should be, but it did create a sunny shift into many people's minds of cinema being a means to communicate beyond existing structures, culture, language, or borders. Parasite was, for many people, myself included, the first time to see a Korean film and an opening to the world of the Korean New Wave. The year was 2020, and it finally happened. I caught the coronavirus. In my quarantine closure, I decided to watch all of Bong Joon-ho's films chronologically, 7 films, 1 for every day. It seemed like a pretty perfect combination as I was fevering with a world-dominating virus myself, watching films about people also taken over by various infections, whether they be physical or psychological. All of Bong Joon's films are genius for various reasons, whether it be for the unique rhythm in their editing, their ambiguity in genre, or their lingering critique on social and class structure. But for me, after this fever, I felt and understood the feeling of revenge like I never had before. His characters seek vengeance, whether it be for the simple annoyance of not being able to work due to a neighboring barking dog in his debut film Barking Dogs Never Bite, or a mother's pursuit of justice in her wrongfully accused son. We feel the bubbling anger of people whose living force is fueled by fury, told through juicy violence like you've never seen it. Bloodshed and brutality are like a piñata exploding of agony, almost making your mouth water as to how colorful and delicious violence can apparently look. And of course, violence is never the answer, but Korea is a country that for the past 100 years has had many reasons to feed this strong internal anger. With a violent occupation by Japan, followed by a proxy war dividing the nation in half, followed by this military regime that you mentioned before, it is a place that has had very few foundations of political stability in its recent history. This imprinted feeling of inside betrayal from people who you thought you trusted is not only central in Bong Joon-ho's films, but can be considered a central theme in many Korean New Wave films by other directors such as Park Chan-wook or Kim Ji-woon, who you might know from films like Oldboy or A Tale of Two Sisters. When I saw Bong Joon-ho giving his acceptance speech on the Academy Award stage in Korean with a translator on stage, the winning of Parasite felt like a sweet, sweet revenge in itself, even if it wasn't intended that way. The award was a long-awaited recognition of a feeling that had never come to fruition. Revenge is a funny sensation, but I have a feeling that she tastes sweeter in Korea.
Wow.
Wow.
That was great. Oh my God. I think it's so interesting what you say, like the being betrayed by someone who you thought you could trust. I feel like that is such a huge central theme. And I think most of the movies that we're going to be discussing today, why do you think revenge is such a big theme in these movies? And what's so fun about watching that?
I think personally, like when we're not even considering these films, the feeling of revenge is so unique in the way that it is not something that it's often more so a fantasy rather than something that you really do, right? Because if you are a truthfully a vengeful person who acts upon these feelings, there's not really a place in society for that. Or I would say other feelings have more place in society. So it's more so like this idea of your own anger, but also your own like misdoings that have been done to you that play a much larger story in your head than they do in the real world. And I think it's something that for that reason people know so well in their minds, but not in their real life. So therefore it's like this strange mix between reality and fantasy as a feeling, I would say. Do you know what I mean?
Totally, because I so often, like I'm in the shower, I was like, if this bitch wants, like I will. But you never do.
You never do. You never do.
So I'm not petty like that, but
yeah, it's like this thing that is aspirational, but also not really. It's like secretly aspirational.
Yeah, it's something we all yearn for. There's definitely, everyone has people in their lives that they would want to take revenge on, but you know, it's fun seeing it in movies to see people actually doing it.
Yeah. And then also I would say specifically when it comes to Korea and Korean films, like during this military regime and what you mentioned earlier about all these restrictions on cinema, from what I've understood, none of the films were allowed to show a side of Korea that was bad, which excludes every like horrible aspect of life, meaning that you only feed this feeling of taking revenge so much more. So like it must be overpowering. I've never been to Korea in my life. I'm curious to see how this manifests in daily life. It should in some way or another.
I thought it was really interesting that you mentioned when you fell in love with Bong Joon-ho and with his movies. And for me, it, not to like one up you, it's like I was earlier, but for
Honey,
me,
that's okay.
But I really distinctly remember when I fell in love with it, and that was in 2016 when The Handmaiden came out, and it made quite a big splash, and that was the first time I saw a Korean movie. And in the same year, Train to Busan also came out. So with those two fucking bangers, I was like, oh, wait, Korea, I was not familiar with your game. And then I started really diving in. And then I found Bong Joon-ho, and I really fell in love with him and his style of filmmaking because I come from a very Spielbergy household more than like an international cinema household. And it really appealed to me because I feel Bong Joon-ho has this type of like almost Spielbergy quality of it's dreamy, but it's funny, but it's always has so many layers underneath about what it's trying to say about society and psychology and people. Then Parasite came out, obviously fell in love with him even more. And I think for me, finding out that he's a silly, goofy guy, making the two Oscars kiss made it so much better. So I ride for Bong Joon-ho.
And he's also like so meticulously referential in his own personal history to cinema. Like the fact that you as a Steven girl can sort of see how that language then translates into a language that's maybe not your own. I think is also like one of his greatest qualities as a filmmaker.
Yeah, it's a thing that he said in his speech, right? Like once you cross the 1 inch barrier of reading subtitles, the whole world opens up. And I feel like for a lot of people, just like foreign language cinema, quote unquote, can feel a little bit like highbrow or difficult or, you know, something that you might have to work on a little bit to like understand the point of view, which is always great to do, by the way. You should definitely try that. But I think Bong Joon-ho makes it so accessible, and I think that is one of the reasons why we're talking about his work today. So a little bit of history about director Bong. He was always a fan of cinema, but he actually started out studying sociology. But then at university, he started a film club, and his interest became so undeniable that he then went to the Korean Academy of Film Arts. And something that he has talked about is that in that time, on any Korean film production, the assistant director had to be a film student, which also immediately explains why there's so much talent coming out of Korea. What an amazing structure to feed talent and to give them a foot in the door. I mean, you're a filmmaker. Is this something that you would love to see in the Netherlands, or is that something that would work, or have you had any interesting experience like that?
I would love to see a lot of things in the Netherlands that are not happening. But I mean, for me personally, I guess it's a little bit different because I make documentary films. And the thing with documentary films is that most of the time, the closer your crew is, the easier it is to film because you don't want like a lot of people within a very intimate setting. So that makes it complicated because then you never see how other people make films. Whereas generally speaking, I would say as a film student, most of the film students that I studied with, you always end up in some set in some way or another because film sets just need like a lot of people.
Yeah.
Someone needs to always be driven to some other location. Yeah. So like you get there anyway. But as an assistant director, that's pretty wild. That's crazy, a huge responsibility. Yeah, I think giving young people a lot of responsibility is something that it probably really fits the political climate of Korea in some way or another because they have to sort of rebuild their own culture in a new way because they hadn't been able to do that for such a long time.
Well, this structure resulted in the fact that when he was ready to make his first feature film, he already had a ton of valuable on-set experience working with directors. His first film was a film that I know you love, but must be really hard for you to watch as the owner of an incredibly adorable dog. It's Barking Dogs Never Bite, which you mentioned in your intro. Can you tell us a little bit about this movie? What does it mean to you?
Barking Dogs Never Bite is, I would say, my favorite Bong Joon-ho film. I think it's a spectacular debut film where you really see that he is laying foundations for all the themes and symbolism that he later delves deeper into. So Barking Dogs Never Bite is a film about a building where a lot of people live and there are some social differences, but it's mostly just neighbors going about their own lives. And we start the film from the perspective of this professor who, you know, quarrels with his wife, is not happy with his job, yada yada, and gets very annoyed by the neighboring barking dog. So then all his frustrations get sort of centered in this, he targets them on this dog by deciding upon killing this dog by throwing him off a building. I will not spoil all the deaths that this film may or may not contain, but this idea of killing an innocent creature, it shows us how life is very unfair for everyone and how feelings of revenge or of ambition or of inequality are all leading their own life in some way or another, and that there is not a very clear good or bad in us as humans, but also in how life unfolds itself. And I think what I like so much about this film is that it uses a lot of style and structure that we know from American cinema. But in American cinema, we are more so used to this idea that at the end of a film, we get a sense of what good and bad is. And Bong Joon-ho never really gives us this sense of relief.
Yeah.
And that maybe makes it even more realistic as to how we experience life itself, because there is not such a clear
good and evil.
There isn't. And we like to believe that, but it shows in all his later films as well, right? Like, because we get so confused as to who we want to point our finger to, then eventually it's also easier to point your finger at yourself because we understand this feeling of revenge or ambition.
Wow, that's an incredible observation. That is something that he does really, really well. He moved on to his second feature. Memories of Murder is a critically acclaimed crime thriller based on South Korea's first known serial killings, and there's two detectives trying to solve it. This is also his first collaboration with the great Song Kang-ho, who is basically the face of Korean New Wave. He's in pretty much every other Korean New Wave movie, and he did the host Snowpiercer and Parasite with Bong Joon-ho. I think Memories of Murder is definitely one of his most famous movies, and I think it was helped in gaining popularity in Western territories by the likes of Quentin Tarantino and Spike Lee naming it as one of their favorite movies and just like never missing an opportunity to promote him. And I'm grateful that it made it overseas so that we could enjoy all of it. What do you think of Memories of Murder?
Oh my God. It's so good. Wow. Basically, like Memories of Murder is like a film noir, right? Here again, like you see these two dudes who are finding a killer, and in their quest of finding this killer, what basically happens is that you sort of start doubting if the quest of justice is supposed to look like this. In that sense, I think it's also like a pretty neat critique on American culture, even if it doesn't try to be a critique, or maybe it does, I don't know. But you see how violent this thriller genre is, or what the underlying horror and violence is of this whole establishment system of seeking justice. And in that way, it becomes pretty anti-establishment, because you're like, who the fuck are these like so-called detectives, just fucking around all day, also like beating up boys. And I like that his films are like deeply political without by any means shoving it down your face. That's so unique. How do you feel about it?
I really love it. I love Song Kang-ho. I think exactly what you said. Like, they are so fucked up, the two of them. They're just kind of like going rogue. And I thought this was an incredible one. But we're going to move on to his next one, where he took a bit of a turn with The Host, which was a completely different...
Oh, is that his next one?
That's his next one after Memories of Murder. And it was a huge departure because it's basically a creature feature, but it has, of course, all these underlying themes of government incompetence and environmental pollution and everything. And the funny thing about this movie is that no one in Korea thought it was possible to do a big creature feature and to actually show the creature. So it was really tough to get funded. And then Bong Joon-ho first went to Japan to get some funding because he's like, Korea's never going to do this. And then Japan came through with some funding, and then Korea followed up. And then they were like, okay, now we have 11 million. We're going to need to do this creature. How do we do this? They ended up spending 5 million on this creature. And first he wanted to work with Weta Workshop, which as a Lord of the Rings nerd really rings a bell for me, which is a huge special effects studio based in New Zealand. But on that budget, he obviously couldn't afford them. And hearts to Weta. Weta's Richard Taylor was kind enough to sit down with him and really give him some thorough advice on how they could best do this creature with the very limited budget that they had.
Wow.
After that little sidebar, he did a really fun triptych short films with Michel Gondry and Leos Carax.
Oh my God, I love
called
that
Tokyo,
film.
Which is really, really fun. Also, Leos Carax's part in that is the precursor to Holy Motor. So, it's really fun at, this stage in Bong Joon-ho's career where he made 3 movies and wasn't really that internationally renowned. To be put on the bill with these 2 directors is really cool as a creative cluster of people that I love.
Yeah, it's such a good film. And it's also I don't know, I remember that I wanted to watch it so bad because it sounded so iconic that these 3 dudes were, working together in that way. But it took me forever to find this film.
Yeah,
I went
it's really
on
hard to
this
find.
weird Russian torrent website, and then eventually another friend of mine found it for me.
No, it came up in my research and it was incredibly hard to download. Sorry, I will totally out myself as a downloader, but don't come after me, please, FBI. And then we move on to Mother in 2009, not to be confused with Mother by Darren Aronofsky from 2017. This is definitely a very different movie.
That's such a different Mother.
That's a different mother. This is a psychological thriller about a mother who goes to very extreme lengths to prove that her son who's being accused of murder, is innocent. I love this one.
It's such a beautiful film.
This is definitely one of my favorites.
Yeah? Why?
Yeah. I feel like it immediately got me. Like the opening scene is so beautiful. It's her standing in a field of wheat and she's just doing this like beautiful, almost like Tai Chi style dance. And she's so calm. And just in the first like 30 seconds, like, yep, you got me. I love this. This is so fun. And then just their whole relationship and the way that you never know with this mother. Like, is she insane? Does she just love her son very much? Did she do something to her son? Is she, what? You know? And I feel like the thing that I love about Bong Joon-ho, which he does really well in Parasite as well, is that this was my Letterboxd review for it, is like every 20 minutes, you just go, oh, word? Fuck.
Oh, word, mother.
Oh, word. This is like really something I noticed about myself, just like watching it at home and just like, oh, word. Every 20 minutes, so, like there's a twist or there's like something insane that you can't believe is happening.
Yeah.
This could have very easily gone the way of like a CSI episode, which is very boring, but it really dives into like all of these like perceived like innocence or just kind of like pointing the finger again. Also, again, vengeance. I believe this is also one of your favorites, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so extremely dense in the way that you almost feel as if Bong Joon-ho has like, he's like in a hurry to show the audience as much as possible in a way like, so it's again like super referential to like, it has like these Hitchcock vibes, but I was thinking it also had Blue Velvet vibes almost. But at the same time being like so extremely personal and again, like I would say wildly feminist in some way because it showcases this idea of what a mother is supposed to be and how this pressure or societal pressure becomes so ingrained into your psyche to the point where it literally drives you nuts. And then also as a story, like what you said, it's like switch. Oh,
you thought you knew where this was going?
Yeah.
Turns out you don't.
No. Yeah.
Another thing I really love about this movie is that the actress, Kim Hye-ya, I hope I'm saying that right, she is an incredibly well-known soap opera actress in Korea.
Wow.
She is the most famous, like, mother in Korean soap opera. She was on a soap opera for, like, over 20 years. And Bong Joon-ho has said, like, I wanted to play with that image of her as the tray of cookies, like Lucille Ball mother.
Right.
And turned that on its head because he saw that there's something sinister behind it. And that's why he put her in this role.
Oh my God. So she is mother. Like to the Koreans, she is mother. Wow, that's so sick.
Yeah.
And smart.
So then he does something pretty crazy. In 2013, he moves into Hollywood. So in 2013 and 2017, Bong Joon-ho made 2 English language films in Snowpiercer and Okja. And a lot of people wondered why he moved into English language when he's been so vocal about like, grow the fuck up and read your subtitles. But he has said the following: I want to work with international actors like Tilda Swinton and John Hurt, and the language naturally became English to accommodate them. That makes sense. And one thing that was important to him moving into Hollywood is that he always kept creative control. And he got into a whole thing with Harvey Weinstein, who wanted him to cut 20 minutes out of Snowpiercer. And he was like, hell motherfucking no. It's heralded as his story is like, and he went up against Harvey Weinstein. I hope he won.
Love that.
I feel like when I talk to my friends about, for example, Snowpiercer, I feel like there's a lot of differing opinions on whether or not it's good. I have to say I really enjoyed Snowpiercer. Okja, I found a little bit less memorable, I have to say. Like, I just had to look up on Letterboxd, like, what did I think of that movie? I don't really remember. How do you feel about his move into Hollywood?
It's funny that he literally did that because he wanted to work with Tilda Swinton. That makes
I would go.
sense. Yeah, I would go to Hollywood for her also.
I would go to the ends of the world for you, Tilda.
Absolutely, yeah. Mother.
Speaking of mother.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe less memorable, but in a way it's pretty unique that films, I mean, both of those films, they are Hollywood films, but they're still also very Korean.
Yeah.
Like they really also speak upon this idea of what the relationship between the US and Korea is, or it tries to unfold it maybe very mildly in some way. I mean, I cannot really think of any other film that is so transnational, as in that is a film that really comes from two places and tells the story of these two places and the future of these two places. Yeah, as a story, I would say maybe less memorable than his Korean films, but memorable in the first time in the world ever that a story is told in this way.
Yeah. And of course, it's all about class, and it has almost this kind of like Hunger Games-y kind of like districts, and you move up on the train.
Yeah.
And another really fun production fact about this is that he actually had a train built. I think it was in Hungary or somewhere where they managed to record this, because Bong Joon-ho was adamant that he wanted to build the train so that in the scenes where people are moving through the different cars of the train, that you could see the other cars in the background moving, and he didn't want to do that with VFX.
Wow.
So that is my king. I bow to you, Bong Joon-ho.
There's a noticeable tone difference between his Korean films and his American films or Hollywood films. And I can't work out if they're goofier because more for the catering towards the audience, or because it's also him as some kind of like satire or pastiche of
Oh, yeah.
how
Right.
Americans
That's a good point.
speak
Yeah.
and stuff. Because like Tilda Swinton's characters are also very like theatrical in a way.
Yeah, it's very much in line with, and I'm going to briefly mention Mickey 17, which we discussed on last week's episode, but very much in line with how Mark Ruffalo is in Mickey 17. It's very like clown-esque, blubbering, and it's very much that. So it could be satire. Or one thing that I also noticed, I think there was this meme recently when Squid Game came out that a lot of people watch, and goddamn you, a lot of people watch Squid Game with like English dubbing, which don't ever do that, please. But someone was saying on TikTok that like the difference between like the Korean style of acting, which is I'm not going to do an impression, but it's very like over the top and like,
Right.
and then English is always very much like this. So is it the English? They are very much over the top, but is it already that when you have a Korean director direct like English speaking actors, that he wants them to go further than the very like naturalistic
That could be
acting
true.
that
Yeah.
they're used to in American films? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe he's just like, I got Tilda Swinton. Let's push the boundaries of what this girl can do.
Yes. But, and also, if I think about it now, coming back to what we said earlier about this idea that a lot of his films don't have a very clear division in what good or bad is, I feel like these films do.
Yeah.
There's a very clear idea of the poor people being the good people and
Yeah.
the rich people being the bad people,
You're so right.
which is true for both Okja and for Snowpiercer. So in that sense, then violence just becomes the violence that you've seen before, whereas violence comes from a person that you thought was good or that you identify with.
Yeah,
Then it feels less violent, maybe also.
you're right. More palatable.
Yeah. But one thing that I do like about Snowpiercer, and it's a theme that is overarching for a lot of his films, is that the idea that class structure is physically visible in the way
Yeah.
that people move through space is very nice. Like it creates so much clarity that my, wild brain is sort of like, I understand this.
Yes.
The people who are living upstairs are doing well off, and the people who are living downstairs
are bad.
Are,
And the people in the back of the train are very poor, and
Yes.
everything is brown and gray. And the
Yeah.
people in the front of the train and everything is gold.
yeah, because for films that are like so, I wouldn't say chaotic, but are telling so much,
Yeah.
that form of structure, it's really nice to hold on to something like that. It's almost like a religious form of symbolism where you're like, I understand this,
Get it.
Catholicism is also like, I understand the symbols.
Yeah.
And to sort of imply that idea of like super functional symbolism.
I think, what you mentioned
Love.
with Snowpiercer, that's so true, because I feel like I've been in the position where I've gone to the cinema here in the Netherlands with an English-speaking friend and then sitting down and being like, oh, fuck, the subtitles are going to be in Dutch, aren't they? And this happened, for example, with Train to Busan, and then my American friend was like, oh, fuck it, I'll sit it out, like, already paid for the ticket. And he understood that movie. And I feel like with Snowpiercer, it's very much the same. You could turn off the sound,
Yeah.
and you could still fully understand what's going on in this movie. And I think
That's
that's an
true.
incredibly strong talent to be able to do. And I like it.
Yeah, I like it too. Yeah. So what did you do after?
So after Okja, then we of course get to Parasite, which you just briefly
Wow.
mentioned with the upstairs and the downstairs.
부모님 얼굴도 뵙고 좋더라 건강들 하시고
일거리가 없으셔도
네가 내 대신 얘 과외 선생님 좀 해줘라 영어
대학생인 척하라는 거야?
구라를 좀 치지 뭐
넌 이 좋은 실력으로 왜 미대는 맨날 떨어지냐?
아이씨 죽을래.
저는 이게 위조나 범죄라고 생각하지 않아요. 참으로 시의적절하다.
I think everyone listening will have seen Parasite, so we probably don't need to give you that much context about it. But Parasite was the first non-English film to win Best Picture at the Oscars. Why do you think it resonates so strongly with international audiences? Do you think it was because we knew Bong Joon-ho from the 2 movies that he made in Hollywood and we're like, oh, that guy made a new movie? Because I don't necessarily think it's that. It's just like a barrier was broken in some way where we could all of a sudden accept this
I only
movie.
also later realized what Okja was and that
Yeah.
that was also Bong Joon-ho because they have a pretty different style to them. What I really love about Parasite is that this constant switching between not only morale but also between genre and between sort of editing style. Yeah, like it's this constant switching that maybe is a similar switching that you were speaking about in regards of Mother.
Mhm.
It also shows you what is possible with the language that you knew already because it's in some way also such an American film, or at least in the way that it's structured, or you know the way you sort of perceive a world is very American. And then to sort of see like, wait, but you can do this with a camera. You have that like constantly throughout the film. So I guess it's for an international audience who is more used to American cinema. Also like, oh, an extension of what I know already.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it expands upon some like the language that we communally speak.
Yeah.
And if Bong Joon-ho would come from a completely different background, then of course you first need to learn a language before you speak it, no? Like, yeah, that's why French cinema is so complicated because you first need to like watch all this bullshit and then you're like, oh, I get where they're coming from.
But I would maybe say that Parasite is such a visceral experience that
Yes.
also as an audience, it's the shock value of everything you're watching.
It has again a high word.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, and also when you say visceral, the first thing I think of is the thud.
Yeah.
The thud when the lady's head hits the wall. That like I
That's
felt that in my
true.
bones. I was
Yeah.
like, oh my God. Oh,
Yes.
you really feel the thud.
It is also like super sensory in so many ways. What I really like about Parasite is that a lot of the feeling is very much about the scent or the smell of the scene. Like they speak about that
Yeah.
a lot, and you can really smell the scenes almost,
Yeah.
which is such a
I can smell the
so
ram-dam.
unique. Yeah, yeah.
I think that draws you in, and then you start to think deeper about what it all means because, again, visually, it's so clear in how the divide, like
Yeah.
you said, between the high and the low, you can't escape it, but you're immediately drawn to it because it's so shocking and just such a fun experience to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is so fun in the beginning when the son gets the job, and then you know how this whole scheme plays out of like, oh, I know this girl from like my cousin's
Yeah.
class who teaches English, and then they rope the dad and the mom in.
Yeah,
and-
yeah,
and
yeah.
you
It
just
has
go like,
something
yeah.
sitcom-y also
Yeah.
almost within that. Yeah. Yeah. Also, we didn't say that all of his films are so fucking funny. Like
Yeah.
they're so funny.
I agree.
And fun and violence is like a Tarantino thing.
Yeah.
But then Tarantino people, they're just bad people. And these people you can like actually empathize with them. So it's like,
Yeah, I really
Plus,
think
plus.
his sensibilities exactly match mine. Like the amount of violence and the amount of humor, it all like feels like very fine tuned to exactly what I like.
yeah.
So one thing that's really funny about Parasite is, of course, he made this whole spiel about like, oh, you have to read subtitles and as we mentioned, but he was offered to do a series remake of Parasite.
No way.
English language by HBO. There was a ton of chatter about it in 2019. He was going to co-executive produce with Adam McKay, and Mark Ruffalo was supposedly cast and everything. But here we are, like 5-6 years down the line, and it's definitely not streaming right now. Everyone had kind of given up on it, but on the Mickey 17 press tour recently, director Bong told Deadline that it's definitely still in development.
No way.
With HBO, and he said the writers are working very hard and that, quote unquote, the writing room of the show itself could be another TV show.
No way.
So that's in the pipeline, and I don't know how I feel about it, but I trust that if he's working on it and kind of like the value that he adheres to having creative control. I don't know, how do you feel about remaking a movie like Parasite in English?
I don't know. Like, isn't that like setting yourself up for failure? Because you sort of blow up the success that something has, but then of course it's successful because it's a star, it's a falling star, so you can't recreate that.
Yeah.
Because if this were to be an American setting, I'm thinking suburbia. I don't know, like this Park family, them, like the rich suburban American family. I don't care for them. I've seen them so often already.
Yeah.
And then it would really become like
White Lotus instead.
Exactly. I was thinking about White Lotus so much while I was revisiting all these Bong Joon-ho films, because I was like, oh, has the same like fine line between this satirical, funny, violence, social stuff. So yeah, I guess we have that in that sense already. So therefore,
yeah.
I mean, I'm sure he can create something genius out of it. So I will watch it for sure, of course. But is that what is needed now? I'm not sure.
I don't know. I also feel very conflicted about it because I feel like with remakes in general, my knee-jerk reaction is to be like, oh, fuck that shit. Like, why did you remake this?
Yeah.
I feel the same oftentimes with cover songs where I'm like, well, the original is better.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I'm like, hey, if this gets more people to watch the thing and get into the thing and have that be a gateway to finding the other thing, which that in result leads to more of this shit being able to be made, I don't really see the harm in it. But yeah, it's hard for me to kind of like tiptoe around that like knee-jerk reaction that I have. I was like, leave it alone.
Right. Because what would really be like a big bummer, because I think we figured out like some structure in Bong Joon-ho's where he's like, when I make something American, there's like a clearer division of what's good and bad. And if that is something that he would then apply to the Parasite story, where the lower class people turn out to be like the most violent people in the film, like, in some way.
Everyone is bad, and also everyone has their intentions.
Exactly.
And, like, motives.
So if that would, like, that ambiguity will be broken, I mean, then you break the magic of the film.
Because that's the whole point of the film. So I hope and pray and put my trust in director Bong to do a good job with that.
Yeah, I also he does social stuff in a building, and then he does dystopia, and then he does like social stuff in a building, and then he does dystopia, and then he does a thriller. So it doesn't fit his career structure. Also, I think now he needs to make a thriller again. Like, it's been a couple of years.
Yeah, because like now we have Mickey 17 in cinemas, and that is hella goofy. It's again.
I'm so
very
excited.
Very different.
Can you give me one word?
Wacky ass.
Wacky ass?
Oh yeah. It's a wacky ass movie.
I'm also
and I really like it.
Excited for this nasal American voice that Robert Pattinson. He also does it in Good Time, like this. I love that Robert Pattinson.
Yeah, I'm glad that the whole pipeline of like a hot guy doing a franchise so that he can then do goofy shit.
Love.
I'm thinking not necessarily hot guys, but like Elijah Wood and Daniel Radcliffe and now Robert Pattinson, I think all went through the same pipeline of doing this huge franchise and then being able to do whatever the fuck they want, which is Swiss Army Man for Daniel Radcliffe or producing Mandy for Elijah Wood. Like I feel like that's, some goal that we struck on with these hot boys with
oh my God.
weird sensibilities. So yeah, that is Bong Joon-ho's career wrapped up in a bow for you. But he's obviously not the only director in the Korean new wave. I think the other big money...
What's Lord doing?
What's Lord up to? So we have another big money player, and that is, of course, Park Chan-wook. So Park Chan-wook, very similar to director Bong, didn't initially want to be a director, and he majored in philosophy. But then also he started a film club at his university, and he says that Hitchcock was the reason he wanted to be a filmmaker. And he made his first movie, The Moon is the Sun's Dream, in 1992. Didn't really make a splash until Joint Security Area in 2000. It very clearly made him a leading voice in Korean filmmaking, and this is also the movie that is credited as the first one in the Korean New Wave movement to really garner international attention. And it also starred the king of the genre, Song Kang-ho. So this one's about 2 North Korean troopers that die at the Korean demilitarized zone, and then a neutral, like, Swiss and Swedish team has to investigate what actually happened. I haven't been able to watch this movie yet. Have you
Me
seen
neither,
it?
no.
It looks really cool. I'm really excited to seek that out. But I think Park Chan-wook is mostly known for the Vengeance trilogy, and that's containing Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance in 2002, Oldboy in 2003, and Lady Vengeance in 2005. And those really established Park Chan-wook as like a huge director worldwide. We're going to be screening Oldboy for our Celebrating Cinema Film Club. And this honestly is just a huge masterpiece for me.
Oh my God, what a film. I recently learned this, that Oldboy has a Bollywood remake. Speaking of remakes, yes.
It also has an American remake,
An
right?
American one, yeah.
I haven't seen the American remake.
Me neither, but this Bollywood one I would love to see.
Oh my God, is there singing and dancing?
I mean, there has to be.
Can't wait to see that. But yeah, we have one perfect Oldboy, so let's discuss the perfect Oldboy that we have. Mm-hmm. I thought this was so incredible. Speaking of O word, this one has the biggest O word of any movie I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And the biggest theme here again is all about vengeance.
And you feel it so strongly because, so to quickly tell you what the film is about for those of you who haven't seen it, it's about this regular blue-collar dude who one day gets kidnapped and then gets imprisoned for 15 years of his life in a prison where he doesn't understand what kind of prison it is, why he's imprisoned.
It looks like an apartment. It's really weird.
It has all these weird elements to it where you literally see him being driven to madness, and then his only connection to the real world is a TV. So he's still able to watch TV where he that's how he gets to know that the world is still spinning, let's say. And, you know, a bunch of mysterious, very crazy, scary things happen to him while he's imprisoned, where he gets gassed to sleep, I think, every night. And he also has, I think, vague recollections of being, what's it called? Hypnotized. Exactly. Yeah, thank you. And one day he's just like randomly released. But then, of course, his whole quest in his life is to figure out who has imprisoned him.
What happened?
What happens?
Who? Why? Where?
And so the rest of the film is sort of this quest in finding his master / imprisoner / bad guy / also finding his family and, meeting a cute girl, But I would say, in general, the idea of being imprisoned without understanding why for 15 years of your life has never felt so physical as to how it is shown in this film. Whereas we know prison films, we've seen sort of the horrors of what prison can be.
Yeah.
But you really, you cannot really feel what 15 years is like in a film, but you feel how long this time is, which is so crazy because the film has such a speed to it also, where you're like, how can I feel that something is 15 years while I'm going through it so fast?
It's so claustrophobic, and you understand you can really feel his confusion. Like, why the fuck am I in this space, and why am I here for 15 years, and why am I all of a sudden released? And like, he doesn't understand what's going on, and that, of course, calls back to what we were talking about in the introduction with like, living under military dictatorship, and you're just like, all of a sudden you wake up and you're like, wait, all of my fucking rights are taken away, and I can't, like, that must be so representative of what that must have felt like living under military dictatorship.
Yeah. And then, without spoiling the film, there is a very dubious aspect to this film in terms of people doing bad things and then trying to take vengeance on it.
Let's just say it's like a clusterfuck of vengeance all the way around the
Yeah.
block.
Yes. And then also, it really speaks into this idea that sometimes ignorance is truly bliss, and that sometimes it's nicer to not take responsibility for your actions, but try to forget the past. And once I sort of aligned that with what maybe a strong sentiment in Korea as a nation is alongside what this story tells, it became so much more powerful to me, because I thought, oh, this is one crazy, beautiful, and painful way to tell the story of a nation's history. And maybe I'm interpreting too much, but I feel like these two things were so aligned in that way. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I really do. And what I also feel is very relatable on so many levels. Like, it could be military dictatorship, or it could be something like in a friendship where it's like, oh, I didn't realize I did anything wrong, and now I'm being put in like prison. Like, there's so many levels to how you can relate to his confusion about the whole thing.
yeah.
I thought that was nice. Like, oh, right, this could mean this, and like, didn't know he did anything wrong. Or it's a movie that we could talk about forever, and definitely come to our film club if you want to see it on the big screen.
Oh
and
my God.
see a great
I'm so
introduction.
excited.
But moving on from the trilogy, in 2009, Park Chan-wook did Thirst, which is a vampire like romance horror film, which we didn't even include in our vampires episode, by
That's
the way, which is
true.
a damn shame. If you want to listen to the vampires episode, that's also on this feed. Very fun episode. But this one won the jury prize at Cannes. I haven't seen this one. Have you seen it? It looks really cool. I'm definitely putting that on the watch list. And then in 2013, in the same year as his friend Bong Joon-ho, Park Chan-wook went international. I don't know why I want to give that a sound, but it doesn't matter.
Give it a
He directed Stoker, which stars Mia Wasikowska and Nicole Kidman.
oh my God, I had no idea.
Yes.
Oh.
He did that. I want to pose a question, because I'm sure that you have no idea about the following. Do you know who wrote that movie?
No, because I don't know of the existence of this movie.
So
Who did?
Elliot and I had a little laugh about this when I found out earlier this week, but this was written by Wentworth Miller.
Sorry, I'm spilling water over. What's that? I haven't heard that name in a very long time. Just like in the first one. What?
Yeah, that was
nice.
a curveball.
Good for him.
Good for
doing
him.
Fun side tracks.
For those of you who don't know, Wentworth Miller of Prison Break fame.
Prison Break.
It would have made more sense if you'd written Oldboy.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like the
yeah.
American version.
Exactly. Wow.
Yeah, that was I was looking at the IMDb page. I was like, am I reading this right? Am I having a stroke?
That's
But
funny.
it was our king Wentworth Miller, the centerfold that was in my locker. Funny. So I also have not seen this, also adding it to the watch list. But then we get to potentially one of the great films of all time, The Handmaiden in 2016. That is a psychological thriller romance set in Japanese occupied Korea.
And you said that was your first.
That was
Korean
my
film
first
that you
introduction
saw.
to this, and my first experience with the word cinematic universe.
Wow. How was that experience for you, or what was your? Yeah, what is that film to
I
you?
know, I just heard a lot about it, and this is almost 10 years ago, so I was a little bit like, oh, I don't know, Korean film. I've never really seen a Korean film. So I went to see it, and I was like, okay, let's go. I was quite interested, and it looked quite beautiful. And I just remember sitting down and immediately from the first moment being like, oh, okay, wow. And it's in several chapters. And when the first chapter ended, I was like, wow, that could have been a whole movie.
Yeah.
I'm satisfied.
Yeah.
And then the second chapter comes along and you're just like, what?
Yeah.
What happened? And then, and it just like turns it on its head each and every time. And meanwhile, being tonally just so beautiful, the set decorations, the costume design, and just the way it goes about things, it is just so stunning to me.
Yeah.
So The Handmaiden is this really interesting movie, and it's about this like Korean con man type guy, and he wants to basically swindle this rich lady out of all of her money, and he gets the help from this handmaiden, like orphan girl, to help him out, like swindling this lady. And that's not the end of it, I shall tell you, but I don't want to spoil too much about it because the surprises that happen in it are just so stunning. For me, at least, like going into it, knowing nothing about it, just even figuring out that it's in chapters that highlight different sides of the same story that happens was already a huge surprise to me. And I thought that was just one of the coolest cinematic experiences I've had, and I will never forget it. And it was quiet for a while on the Park Chan-wook front, but then he made decision to leave in 2022, which is also a very Hitchcockian romantic murder mystery that won the Best Director at Cannes. I have to say, like, I need to revisit this because I remember very vividly, but also not, when I saw it, because I saw a late screening of it at like 9:30, and it's very like slow and building and and I just remember being so confused that someone's like, "Wait, did I just fall asleep or did I just not get it?" And then turns out I was with my boyfriend at the time, and it turned out that we had both fallen asleep because like this is a really short movie, but it turns out I just missed a huge chunk of it. So I definitely need to revisit and crack a couple of Red Bulls. But have you seen this one?
No. I remember it being in cinemas, but then, I don't know, sometimes you just miss things.
Sometimes, and ain't that the truth? So yeah, we both definitely want to revisit this. I remember it looking really cool, but I just like couldn't stay awake. And this is when I learned and made the rule for myself: never go see a movie after 7. I am too old and I can't do it. And I don't know if there's something wrong with my blood pressure, but I can't sit in a dark room after 9. I will fall asleep. So those are the two big ones in the Korean New Wave. Might have some honorable mentions. Kiriko, do you have any other movies that you want to highlight from the Korean New Wave?
The two films that I want to highlight from that we discussed, which I think are also lesser known movies, are this Tokyo trilogy and then Barking Dogs Never Bite. Because Barking Dogs Never Bite, for those who have seen Parasite, which I think is, the most famous film in this list, it really is in some way a prequel to Parasite in the way it's you see that Bong Joon-ho is really experimenting with the themes that he then later develops. I just had another thought about why his films are popular internationally or why they cross these borders, which is, I think, because it taps into, and I'm going to say the N-word again, by which I mean nostalgia.
I was going to say, Elliot got the tape.
Not again, Kiriko.
No, like it taps into this feeling of nostalgia.
Yeah.
Because they are so referential to films that we have already seen and already know. So you feel that you're revisiting something, but then almost a better version of it.
I think one last thing I want to shout out is that in the 1960s, there was a movie called The Housemaid by Kim Ki-young. And that is one that is kind of heralded as the Korean inspiration for Bong Joon-ho and Park Chan-wook and his fellow generations filmmakers. That's also one that I'm very excited to seek out and see if I can find legally, of course. But yeah, that was this black and white movie that is one of the first movies to tackle all these themes and apparently does it in a really cool way. So I'm definitely going to seek that out.
Wow, sounds cool.
So Mickey 17 is playing now twice a day at Lab 111 in Amsterdam. And if you want to dive into some Bong Joon-ho, Parasite is also getting rescreened here at Lab 111. So check the show notes if you want to grab your tickets for that. Hey, if you got really excited about us talking about Oldboy, as I just mentioned, we're doing a Celebrating Cinema screening here at Lab 111 with an introduction from the amazing Kiriko. And tickets for that are also in the show notes. That's going to be on the 27th of March. Hope to see you there. Stay connected with us at Celebrating Cinema and Lab by following at Lab111 on Instagram and Letterboxd. Do you love what we do? Support us by leaving a review on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps us climb the ranks of the podcast charts. And don't forget to check the show notes for all the films mentioned, bonus info, and ticket links. This was a Lab 111 production, edited and produced by Elliot Bloom, with music from Hugo Emertzal and artwork from Studio FFF.